All right, welcome back everybody to Module 7. In this module, we're going to spend some time thinking about how do we use that data that we talked about in Module 6 to really drive the decision making in our classrooms, to make sure we're really choosing the right interventions and using them with the right intensity to make sure we're really seeing change in student behavior. We want to, of course, acknowledge all of the folks whose work went into creating these materials. Folks from the National PBIS Center and from the Northeast PBIS Leadership Group all contributed to these materials. In this module, you'll see many of the familiar resources that you've had in other modules. The videos will walk you through all of the content. Your workbook allows you to follow along, filling in content along the way. All of your activities will be there for you to complete as we go. And all of the additional resources will be in that additional resources folder for you to use. In this module, we'll use a couple of different activities. We'll use some stop and jots, which at this point you're familiar with. These are just an opportunity for you to pause for a minute and think through the things that you've been learning. Write down how this might apply to your classroom. Discussion board posts give you an opportunity to interact with other folks that are taking this course with you. The workbook quizzes are just designed to be a self-assessment for you. Are you able to repeat back or to understand the content that we covered in this module? And then the coaching activities at the very end will allow you to apply this content in your classroom, and we'll provide some guidance for that as well. We recognize that you might be at very different stages in your learning and in your career, and so we wanted to give a little bit of advice on how to think about accessing this material based on where you are in your teaching career. Some of you may be pre-service teachers. You have yet to have your own classroom and you're learning about this for the first time in your undergrad or master's program. This is an opportunity for you to really become fluent with the content and the theory. Look for examples that you might be seeing in schools where you're volunteering or in your clinic placements. Use video to record yourself and see how well you're doing on these particular things, and ask for feedback on these strategies in your student teaching placement. Brand new teachers, this is your opportunity to start thinking about how you can turn this knowledge that you have into practice. You've got your own classroom now. You can think about how do you really make this fit your context and your particular teaching style. So set some particular implementation goals for yourself and monitor your progress towards those. Use some of the data that we talked about in Modules 6 and 7 to really monitor your own implementation as you go forward. And for experienced teachers, some of this content may be new to you. Some of it may be things you've heard and been practicing for a while in the past, and this is your opportunity to think about how can you support other teachers in your building, how can you coach this content, and how can you continue to refine and improve your practice in your classroom. As we go forward, we're going to think a little bit about how the content we're talking about today relates to the model that you've seen hopefully in other courses within this series. We're going to think a little bit about this DBI model and build a parallel model for behavior. You've seen this in our other modules in this course. We're going to start out by implementing the 5 critical features of classroom management. So having routines and structure, having and teaching expectations, actively engaging kids in their instruction, and having a continuum of strategies to respond to both appropriate and inappropriate behavior. We're going to get those things implemented with fidelity, and that's really our starting place. That's the bottom line. That's your tier 1 for everybody. We get those things in place. Once that's in place, we're going to think a little bit about how do we check for that. So that was a little bit of the content in last module, a little bit in this module. We're going to progress monitor to make sure that we're actually keeping up with that and to see whether kids are responding. Are we doing this with a level of intensity that's meeting the needs of the kids in our setting? If kids are responding appropriately, great. We continue to just monitor that we're implementing with fidelity as we go forward. If kids are not responding the way we hope and that there still are some problematic behaviors in our classroom, we're going to do some more assessment to start to understand what's going on. And that's really the topic of this module, is really how do we dive into this a little bit deeper to problem solve and select a solution that really matches the specific data and the specific problem in our classroom. We're going to then look at which intervention adaptations make sense for our particular contents based on the data that we have. So this might look like increasing the frequency with which we use some of these strategies, the duration, the precision of those 5 critical features of classroom management. And then, of course, we'll monitor the progress of that particular adaptation, see whether kids are responding or not. If they are, great, we continue to progress monitor and adjust as needed. And if not, we're going to start to think a little bit more deeply about getting even more precise in what we're doing And then eventually we'll start to think about individualizing these supports and really using this DBI model for behavior in a more intensive, individualized way. That is not the focus of this course. It is not the focus of this module. There are additional resources that we will provide for you at the end of this course that really talk about individualization. In this course, we're really focused on Tier 1 and intensifying a little bit for kids or in settings where you might need a little bit more than that, but we're really not talking about individualizing for individual behavior problems at this point. So in this module, we're going to talk a little bit about why we use data for decision making. We're going to determine if are those core features in place in your classroom or not. Are the kids responding as we hope they will? And then we'll talk about how to build an action plan to intensify your use of these classroom management practices in your classroom to fit your context and to fit your data. And we'll end by really thinking about putting together a very precise action plan to meet the needs of your classroom or your context.